But why is it the will of the Father that the perfect servant would be crushed? We find that in verse 6 when we see this legal transaction. God the Father lays the sins of his people upon the servant. We call that imputation, to place legally upon an account. Actually, there are 3 imputations in the Bible, and they're all very important for us to understand the cross. First, the sin of Adam was imputed to every person Adam represented. We may not like that, but that is how God has dealt with humanity, is through a representative, Adam, the original representative. If Adam would have perfectly obeyed, hypothetically, we would have been treated as people who had perfectly obeyed. Romans chapter 5 explains this. But there is a second imputation. When Christ was on the cross, God imputed to the perfect servant every sin of every one of his people. And so he was treated as if he had done what we did. He did not become sinful, morally contaminated, but he became the legal bearer of our shame, of our guilt, treated as if he had done these things. So our sin imputed to him. And finally, Paul tells us in 2 Corinthians that we have been given his righteousness, his perfect obedience imputed to the believer, so that we're not only washed by the cross, but we are also, legally speaking, we stand before God clothed with the righteousness of someone else, a foreign righteousness. What is the outcome of the cross, of the crushing of the Son? Well, just to highlight some of the biblical themes, I want to give you 4 words that come to mind, and we're only going to be able to just mention them. One is that Christ becomes the sacrifice, or the atoning death. He has expiated or removed the shame and the guilt of our sin. He has carried it off. He has legally atoned for it. Expiation is man's view of the cross. We look at Christ on the cross and we realize my sin is there, and my sin has been dealt with by a sacrifice, and it is now covered and removed from the sight of God. Sacrifice. Second word, propitiation. We could say that this is God's view of the cross. God looks upon the cross and sees that his just and right wrath is satisfied by the full payment that was due. His law is actually upheld. So God is being honored as the one that is perfectly righteous, because Jesus Christ becomes the object of his wrath, and Jesus satisfies all that the law requires for the payment of sin. So here we have God, the lawmaker, who is upheld, his honor is upheld at the same time that the enemies of God, us, are rescued. Propitiation. Third word, reconciliation. This is a favorite word of the New Testament writers. We are reconciled through Christ's death. That is, the death of Christ removing the object of offense between God and us. God is now, if we might say it, is free to unleash this unexpected love upon us and to rescue us in a way that is not only merciful, but just, not only kind, but right. The object being removed, there is no longer any alienation between my soul and my Creator. We are reconciled. There's a restoration of what was lost in Adam, and it's restored in Christ. And finally, ransom. Christ purchased us from slavery. Who was the ransom paid to? Well, to God, not to the enemy. He doesn't own us. In a sense, it's a very human way of describing it. So there is a sense in which the metaphor breaks down, but Christ has purchased our freedom by paying to God all that was owed from us. We're now free. I wanted to tell you about the Media Gratiae app. If you get the Media Gratiae app, you will receive the Whole Counsel podcast a day early. But much more importantly, you'll be able to listen to all the podcasts on the Media Gratiae network. If you're interested in this, then see the link in the show notes below.